It is that time. It is Mental Health Monday with your host, Chuck Bastie. How'd that sound?
That's not bad, man. That's not bad. There you go.
I
You could
feel
have
like
a job in voiceover work.
the Johnny Carson show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Chuck Bastie. Mental Health Mondays.
Yeah.
Hey, what a week. It's been a crazy week. It's Groundhog Day every day. It's Groundhog Week. Oh, gosh, it's a Groundhog Year. Tell me what's going on in your life this last week, because mine's been just absolutely crazy.
Wow. Funny you should ask. We had a Hockey Meets Hollywood event in North Bay this weekend. So we had a collaboration. A friend of mine is filming a movie up there called The Prospect.
Yes.
And so Josh Pyro, the executive producer, with Mandy Gosling and Gordon Whiskey, we're doing a casting call up in North Bay, and we had the North Bay Battalion come into Bill Barber Arena, or the Bill Barber Sports Complex in Callendar, Ontario, just a little south of North Bay, and I conducted mental health sessions for all the kids for the day, which was a very full day, and me being a massive introvert, everyone thinks I'm an extrovert. But I was telling one of the parents, I said, tomorrow I'm going to have a really big hangover because I'm not used to, this amount of people, especially during COVID, talking as much as I did. Yeah, I think I did 6 hours of talking. And then, I woke up the next morning. I felt like I had been drinking all night long on a bed like we used to do back in our 20s when we were playing hockey and whatnot. And it was a full hangover from the event, but it went swimmingly well. We made the CTV evening news in North Bay. Yeah, so it was a great event, and and now I'm glad to be home. So.
Oh, it's amazing. Hey, listen, speaking about that, having that hangover of going in front of people and stuff like that. Wednesday night, look at who I've got on. I got Wellness Wednesday.
Looks more and more like a guru every single. It's funny that you can actually get my best friend on your show, and I can't get my best friend on my show. How does that work?
Maybe that's telling you now he's my best friend. He's an amazing guy, and I asked him a couple of weeks ago, hey, listen.
What are you guys talking about?
Well, we're going into the long weekend with the challenges that we're all going through. I'm really excited about our guest tonight. I know you and Donna are going to have a great discussion on the trials and tribulations of all this. And I use that in both terms. Like there are trials. And that's what we're going to talk to Stephen about, because now people, after this long weekend, it gets real again. We don't know what's going on with the variant. School's back. Donna, of course, is in the ad agency business. How is that? How has she had to pivot? And she being in that business, you have to meet people. Like, it's not, you just can't hide behind the screen anymore. And I think, that's really important to understand. And Steve Morris is going to help us with the engagement after getting out of this long weekend. Businesses should start opening up again. Oh, there's another variant. What does that mean? What's going on? I went to the Blue Rodeo the other night, and I got to tell you, the crowd followed all the rules. Everybody's wearing their masks. The band was great. Everything was fantastic. Everybody knew they had to stay in line, and they did that. And people would just, hey, please put your mask on. There was no confrontation whatsoever. And now, how is that going to roll itself out after this weekend? And that's what I'm excited to talk to Stephen about.
Yeah, I saw that Jim Cuddy singing on stage. Like, I think he has to be the most underrated Canadian singer of all time. Like, he has just such a wonderful voice, a wonderfully true voice. And it's never changed from the time he's been in his 20s to now. But I love the voice of Jim Cuddy. He's just so soothing and vibrant. I love him.
Well, I want to just say before we bring Dawn up, watching the show, I was a little bit disappointed in the Blue Road. It's Tony's favorite band. She was really nervous about going. And I got to tell you, the band before, the warm-up act, was better. I love Jim Cuddy. I cannot say anything bad about him. But Alan Doyle from the Great Big Sea stole the show. Like, he was unbelievable. They had this girl with a violin, that kind of eclectic music. It was unbelievable. I loved it. I love Jim Cuddy, but I got to say, Alan Doyle, I'm a big fan of him already. I don't think I've ever – I know there are songs from it's called The Great Big Sea, isn't it? Or
yeah, Great Sea, yeah.
I don't know what songs he played, but I'll tell you what, his voice was absolutely fantastic. Now listen, as we get going here, good evening, legends, Aaron Kuzak. And you know what, Chuck, we're going to line you up. I think you should go. He has an incredible show, What's Happening, and you'd be perfect on it. So there's a clear invite for you to get on that show. Hey, listen, it is Mental Health Mondays. We are blessed to have one of my very, 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 very dear people in my life. I love her dearly, Donna McCarthy.
Hey guys,
Hello, Donna. Welcome to the show.
thank you. I'm coming to you from Great Big Sea Country here with
Yes, you are.
yes, my dear. You got to listen to all Great Big Sea. You got to listen to The Night Patty Murphy Died. It's a great song. They're great.
Because I got a chance to watch him in a warm-up act, he could have been the headliner as far as they were equal in how good the acts were. And so I am actually going to that. I'm going to listen to Great Big Sea now. Because his voice is spectacular. You said Jim Cuddy's got a great voice, and he died at 65 years old, and he was stellar on stage. It's just that Alan Doyle played such great music, and they had that girl with the violin. She was spectacular. You were really, really upbeat. And then if you guys know Blue Rodeo, I'm not. Tony's a big fan. I'm a quasi fan. They just had a bunch of. They brought you up, and then there was a lot of lull, lull, lull. Brought you up, lull, lull, lull. And Alan Doyle kept you going the whole time. So that's my only criticism. And it was thunder and lightning, let me tell you. It was date night with my wife, with Kelly Allen and his beautiful wife. And we sat in the car for an hour and a half in our own car with a bunch of other people because they wouldn't let us in.
Thunderstorm.
Lightning.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to be down below being the producer of this great show. I'm really excited about it. And so, Donna, I can't thank you enough for all that you've done for me in my life. Obviously, you were my sister's best friend. We all know the history of my young sister. I think of her often. It's been that week. I don't know why, but people have been suggesting, about my sister and telling stories about Karen. So, man, when I think of her, I think of you, Donna, and all the great things you did for her. Love you.
Love you too. Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Have a great show, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks. Wasn't that a lovely introduction by?
He's a good boy. He's a good boy.
Well, you must have done really well beside him as well, because he didn't speak about that to everybody, Donna McCarthy. So you're one of the good ones, obviously.
Well, thanks. Yeah, he is too, and so are you, Chuck.
Oh well, thank you. Listen, I thought we'd have you on the show just to talk about everything about pivoting, about being able to move forward. I mean, obviously, we're going to be looking at probably another shutdown of COVID coming down to us, with a new variant coming down our way in September that we have to roll ourselves out for. But you have an interesting story as well, obviously, in the marketing industry and advertisements, to go through what we've gone through for the last 18 months. And I thought we could really relate to this, because people who are watching, or people who are going to be watching the show later on, are going to be able to relate to, in their own lives, of how they've been shut down, how they've been blocked, how they've been impeded, how they've had to pivot, and then be able to create some sort of camaraderie, I should say. So that way we can all feel like we're all in this together, as opposed to having FOMO, thinking, I'm not missing out on anything because nothing's going on. But so I thought I'd get a couple of minutes just to kind of introduce yourself to our viewers, and just what your story is and what you've been able to do throughout this time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, briefly. I have an ad agency. It's called Dory. I started it in St. John's, Newfoundland, in 2003. Prior to that, I was a creative director in Toronto for about 15 years, different big shops. Was responsible for some stuff that you might know, like How Young Do They Have to Be Before We Give a Damn for Covenant House, which is 20 years later is still running. Part of A Complete Childhood for Wonder Bread. And I wrote the line, The Future's Friendly, for Clarinet, which is now TELUS. And then I was recruited to go to Newfoundland, and I ended up staying and starting my own thing. And I love it. Primarily now, for the last 15 years, I've done mostly radio. I prefer radio, so I've been staying close to that. Produce about 600 radio ads a year, primarily for Sobeys and all of their banners. And have a production studio, so I produce a lot of it too. I don't just write it or creative direct anymore. It's a small agency, but we're still floating the dory, so that's lovely. And we were virtual before the pandemic. Everybody was working from wherever they wanted to since 2008. So when everybody else went into isolation and had to figure out how to work from home, we had been doing it for a long time. So that didn't really impact it. And radio's, a really easy medium to do at a distance. It's not like television or print, you don't necessarily have to be in the room. And sometimes it works better, actually, even with clients, to get approvals if they're just listening in, because without being distracted by how, what things look like or what the voice talent looks like in the studio or whatever, when you're just listening, as you should, because it is radio, sometimes it's nicer to get approvals at a distance. So it's worked out well for me. And so, I haven't noticed work-wise too much of a difference. And because my biggest client is grocery, they've obviously done extremely well during this. People were eating more, I guess, and hoarding food. So as a result, my biggest client did exceptionally well. And and I do a lot of not-for-profit stuff. And of course, there's a big need for that too over the last little while. So I haven't had to, and I am an introvert, so I haven't had to do too much in terms of give up my social activities or anything. I was going to take up curling right before this started, and I was really relieved that I didn't have to.
It's funny that you should say that, because I took up curling too, but I was so bad at the sport, I just stuck with the hair. So.
The perm.
Sorry, you walked right into that one. I couldn't just let alone at all. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, obviously in marketing, you're going to have a spider web of connection to people. Obviously, we're all connected together inside of social media and marketing, advertising. There's a whole world out there trying to have the psychology of how to connect to your audience. I loved your example with Covenant House as well, because that was absolutely brilliant ad campaign, because it really connected. When you're talking about how young do they have to be before we actually care, that hits you right in the feels.
And we're working on one now. We're taking it now, and I don't mind saying this because if somebody should steal it, God bless, fill your boots. But how old do they have to be before we stop caring and try and focus? That came out of the very beginning when the body bags were flying out of long-term care facilities in Quebec, especially. And they weren't dying of COVID, they were dying of neglect, right? And they were dying of neglect before that. So we're kind of taking that idea of Covenant House, how young do they have to be, and turning it into how old do they have to be before you stop caring, because that seems to be, we stop, we aren't all that interested in old people. So that's a little bit of something that I'm working on now. So we'll see how that goes.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was sitting in North Bay after a function on Saturday. We went out downtown. And there was a really large population of homeless people that were my age and maybe a little bit older. And they were like roaming the streets like vampires. And there wasn't a whole lot of walk down traffic downtown on the main strip in North Bay. But the people who were walking were obviously, people who were homeless, or they come from addiction backgrounds or mental health problems. Instantly identifiable. And when I was asking my buddy who was having a drink with, what's going on with the homeless population here, he's just like, they're the only people that are left downtown now, and people don't come downtown now because of that, and they have nowhere else to go. But that's where all the traffic has been. And it's funny you should say that, because I'm in the mental health industry. And instantly I see that, my first reaction is like, what's the story of this person that has led to their, homelessness, or the trauma that's led to that? And that night, my first question was, why are they old? And then, I immediately noticed on my own thought process that I gave less of a shit that they were my age than I would have cared if they were like 16. 14, 10, something like that, then I would have actually, got off of my chair. But like you said, because they're older, like my brain just, keeps my ass on the seat. And I just look at them and just think, what's the story that's involved there as well? And until you just said that right now, I never really thought about that until you just brought that up. And I'm absolutely guilty of that.
I think until we know the right last week, I guess they had set up, those makeshift homes for homeless people. But they did it right in central Halifax. So I don't know why that was the case. To me, that was the biggest thing. But at any rate, they erected these structures, which were wooden and livable. And then they came along and they gave them fair notice that they were going to tear them down. So there was all this big rally, and the police came and they tore them down. But there wasn't a journalist that went in to say, "Who are you?" And without actually interviewing the people who live there and hearing their stories, you're not going to change either camp. So the people that just naturally think they should stay because that's how they're cut, right? This is the cloth they're cut from. We should naturally care for homeless people, whatever. They're not going to question it. And the people that are naturally going to say, well, they have no right to be in the park and set up a home there, are going to say that too, until you identify who it is. And in that way, you can move both of them, right? So if it happens to be a 19-year-old kid who just doesn't want to live at home, which could be, then maybe this side's going to say, oh, I didn't realize that. If it happens to be a 22-year-old mentally ill person who can't get into a shelter, then maybe the people that are over here that are saying nobody should live there are going to be moved too. So until we hear the stories of the people there, the individuals, it's so important to, in advertising, we have this thing to put eyes to something. And we even did it with Clarinet Tell Us, putting the animals, you see the eyes as opposed to just showing a phone. If you can see eyes, there's going to be a relationship, whether it's an animal or a person or whatever. And because then you can see into the soul, you can see that there's something going on, and it's how we connect, right? Is through the eyes. And in all these stories, sometimes with homeless, they forget to tell us who's behind those eyes. Like, show the eyes, tell us the story. And that's the only way you're going to motivate people, right? Is to personalize it that way, I think.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on Friday. Sorry, that's my phone going on. It's going to ring for a couple of seconds. No, I don't. Live television, who has a landline anymore? That serves me right. But back to my story while I ignore my phone going on in the background. A friend of mine was telling me that, this coming fall we'll be launching a program for the NHL hockey show that we have lined up, and he's a hairdresser. And, one of his contacts is a guy called Six Man. And he treats beards for men, and of course, obviously, a lot of hockey players have men beards. Yeah. And we were talking about this, and he just said that he's like, Chuck, is there any way that with your connection to the mental health field, you can reach out to your community and offer free haircuts for these people? Because I will do that for them. I will go to their home. I will go downtown. I will be able to, do whatever I need to do. Because here's the reason why. Because there are no such thing as bad boys. There's just boys with bad haircuts. And haircuts don't lie. And I thought that was kind of funny. And I kind of coined that phrase. But he's like, yeah, but once they get their hair cut and their beard trimmed down, people look at them differently. And then you get small win factor coming in. And then they see themselves differently. And I said, well, do you think sometimes the homeless population, people have that look so it plays on more of the sympathy card? So that way they can get more attention or more panhandling or whatever that is. And he's just like, I really don't think that they think that way. I don't think that they see it at all. I think that's the last thing on their mind when you're interested in survival is your appearance. And it's not like you're going for a job interview. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was incredibly nice and kind that he said, can you reach out to your community and find out how I can do some, hey, it's COVID, I'm not going anywhere. Right. And I could go downtown, but we can give them small wins by cleaning them up a little bit and pride of ownership of what they have with their soul connection. When you look them in the eyes and you see transferring difference, I mean, there's all those TV shows that are like movie makeovers where people come in and get their hair done or their makeup done or their teeth done, and they look like completely different people on the outside, yet we're still looking at them as if they are human beings first as opposed to homeless people.
That's right. Yeah. And it does make a difference, right? I mean, how you perceive yourself, how you feel. We all feel that way. Put something fancy on or whatever, we have a tendency to feel better about ourselves. Even something clean, that's helpful, right, for homeless people.
Even this weekend I was up in North Bay and I came back, and for whatever reason, I just jumped in the shower, had a nap, got in some clean clothes, and that was just an option for me. There's people that just don't have that option to do that. And, coming home, it was only a day that I was gone. I left Friday night, came back Sunday afternoon. And yet I still had that feeling as well that I was just, feeling like 110% better just having a shower and getting a change of clean clothes, which was, amazing. But, something that we just take for granted in our day and age.
Yeah, it is about, being grateful for what you have, especially when you look at today, what happened in New Orleans, what's happening in Afghanistan, all the people that are effectively homeless right now that weren't homeless a week and a half ago, and they're but for the grace of God, right? So as we sit and judge and say, maybe they want to look this way or they don't want to look this way, that could be you and I tomorrow. I mean, it just takes one catastrophic event, whether it's, war or weather or just bad choice, right? One bad decision. We're all pretty close to that.
It's funny you should mention that because I was lucky enough to get into the prison system out in Maplehurst in Milton, Ontario, which is a medium security prison here just outside of Toronto. And I got to meet the warden at an event, and him and I were talking about the difference between rehabilitation versus punishment in our penal system. And, he actually had some great insight about how they're just regurgitating traumatized people out in the world, especially in the holding center while they're waiting for trial coming in, and just the story that went into. So he got me to get to the prison. I got the chance to interview some of the inmates, the guards, and what a different world that was. And my takeaway from that was that these aren't, don't get me wrong, there's some really bad people that deserve to be in there that should never come out. Not because, they deserve to be punished, but because they're a danger either to themselves or they're a danger to other people, and they're directing. Right. And those are people that should obviously be kicked out of society. But my take is, and I was there 3 times, spending a total of maybe 10 hours. And then I was a public speaker there for one of their galas. And again, afterwards, I got to interview and talk to people as well. These are just traumatized people that, just like you said, had a nanosecond go wrong and something switched differently in their brain and they reacted, and the worst fear comes true. And now they're sitting in prison for 5 years, for 10 years, for 2 years, for 2 years less a day, or 6 months. And, after that happens, that's further trauma on top of trauma.
Oh, God.
And you don't get out of that one without some sort of serious resource at the end of that. And who's really going to put money into that?
Right. But we like to judge, don't we? Like that's, whether somebody, how many times when you're growing up or whatever, there may have been a moment when you got behind the wheel and you were lucky, like you had a beer or two. But anytime anybody makes the mistake, they get in the car, and it's a terrible thing. But then they, it's still tragic for the person driving too, right? But we're just so judgmental about everything. Anytime anybody makes a big mistake, it's like as though we all couldn't have done that too, right? Even
we just had Ron McLean on the show last week, and we were talking about the Humboldt tragedy out in Saskatchewan, and the unspeakable tragedy of the bus driver or the truck driver just blowing the stop sign. And I said to Ron, have you reached out to the bus driver? Because I know myself.
Yeah.
I can tell you a dozen times that I've done that. Yeah. I can tell you a time I came back from a 40-hour session at a casino where I was playing poker for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I don't remember how I got home on Sunday because I was and I don't drink, but I was so sleep deprived that I fell asleep at the wheel 3 different times on the way home, and by the grace of God, I got home. I have no idea which route I came or how I got there, but how many times have I blown the stop sign, not been present, been lucky enough to have that happen. And that's all it was. It was just pure blind luck.
Yeah, so much to do with luck. Life is just so much to do with luck and, and good luck and bad luck, right? I mean, you can't really judge anyone, I don't think. And we were going to talk about pivoting, but I don't know. Maybe it's more interesting to talk about just acceptance, right? Like the idea.
Well, I think if you want to go with judgment and pivoting, I'll take both of those on right now and go straight to that mainstream because I have a real issue these days with myself. Like you say, we shouldn't judge, but like I'm a heavyweight champion judger, like king heavyweight champion. It's what I do. My
Mhm.
brain doesn't want to know right or wrong. All it wants to know is an answer. And
Right.
I get very, very careful of the narrative that I'm listening to in my brain, because it's literally two different narratives. It's, what I call my Chucky doll on my shoulder,
Right.
who is the wounded 8-year-old boy that wants to kill everybody. And all of his only job is to keep me safe in the moment, so that way nobody hurts my feelings. And
Right.
he has no regard to tomorrow, yesterday, accountability, any of that. He doesn't care.
Right.
And that's my job as Chuck Bastie, to make sure that I clear up the mess of what Chucky does.
Right.
Chucky's my ego, and my ego is not my amigo. And I've always got to tell him, it's okay, buddy, I got this. You don't have to worry about this. We're older. I got a new set of toolbox I can dip into now and figure this out. But thanks a lot for having my back on this when he goes away. But on the judgment side, it's just so knee jerk just to go out there and then be able to, and where I was going with this is the judgment on pivoting. So I have this judgment, or this, this thought process that everybody should have been using this time during COVID to pivot. If you didn't have an online platform, now you know why you need an online platform if you're a business. If you did things the old way, you still have a rotary phone, now you know why you need to actually not have a rotary phone, and you need to actually get a website, talk to an SEO person, talk to a social media person, be able to come up with a strategy, any of these things here, because before this, you could have got away with it. And now after this, like, it's not going away. This is the new norm. And so I have this judgment about, people who are still, if you've ever read that book, Who Moved My Cheese? So it's kind of like that, where there's still people that are still waiting for the cheese to come back, and that cheese is never coming back. And either you have to get up and go look for new cheese, or find a new source, or it's not coming back. There's still those people. And so when it comes to me, I'm gonna throw down some judgment on why they're sitting there still waiting for cheese.
Yeah, why they haven't done anything. But then, but I think too, right? We just have to be really gentle with ourselves, like, and just whatever worked for you. Like if I think in the beginning there were most people, and if they're honest, there was a moment, it's kind of like when the lights go out, when the electricity goes out. There's a little part of us that loves that, right? We're somewhere and the lights go out and the power goes out. There's about there's a time, even a whole night, I think most of us are pretty good with it. It gets us back to that thing where we had to survive. We got to get candles and,
primal, primitive feeling.
Yeah, we have to find a way to kind of get through this. And it's a little scary, but it's kind of interesting, and it's quiet, and it's all that. And I think in the beginning of the lockdowns, I think there was a lot of that for people. They were thinking this is kind of interesting, aside from the tragedy of the people that got sick. I don't mean to minimize that. That's a terrible thing. But for the people that just had to go through the lockdowns, I think there was a level of enjoyment that there, in the very beginning, there was a feeling of cocooning and I have to survive this. And then you get back into that part of yourself that we would have been in hundreds of years ago. How do you survive anything that you're not used to? But then, of course, it went on a little bit too long. But as we come out of it, I do think there were a lot of people that are struggling with that bit of it, that part that kind of was accepting it, and then that became the new norm, and now we're just supposed to go back to something normal. And then of course there's that threat that, oh no, it may not be something normal. So the uncertainty, there was a certainty with the lockdown. They said for at least 3 weeks you're going to be in lockdown, whatever, you're going to have to learn to survive. I hope you have enough of what you need, and how do you get food and all that stuff. And now it's like, okay, you're going to go back out into the world and you're going to experience it supposedly the way it was. And maybe you liked it not being the way it was. And so I think there's a lot of people that have to figure out how to be really gentle with themselves. If you're not ready, you're not ready. I know a lot of clients that are quitting because they're being told you have to go back to the office. And they are introverts, or they just have little kids, or whatever the situation, and they just don't want to go back to the office. So they're having this struggle about, what do I do? Am I true to myself? And I just say, you know what, this whole thing actually worked really well for me. Or do I go back to the world that I didn't love, So everybody just has to, I think, you didn't have to change the world. You didn't have to go online if you're a restaurant. You didn't have to write a book, whatever. But I think you have to be kind to yourself and figure out what is that thing that's going to make you feel okay, just be gentle with that.
You say that, and it's funny because I had a few different conversations with some adults and some parents this weekend up in North Bay, where I think their parents kind of hovered at the back of the room, wondering what I was going to say with their kids there present, and they had no agenda or no, I guess, warning of what I was going to talk about. And I took the age of the room and I just rolled with it. There were younger kids. We started talking about what they were dealing with. The older kids, we started talking about distinctions in mental health as well. But I think by the end of each session, parents came up to me in between and were asking me like, "Hey," and it's funny because I'm 49 right now, and when my dad was my age, he was the oldest person I knew. And now I'm his age, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't be that decrepit. I'm too vain for that. But the people my age are asking me like, what do you do for self-love? How do you love yourself? I really struggle with this. And I think my generation is probably maybe a pioneer, because my father's generation never asked that question, especially not being in the military. And then my answers to them were about filling glass. And what do you do to make sure when you wake up in the morning, you have a full glass right here, say the line's up here, and they get and I have breakfast, and I say to the kids, you have an argument with your sibling and your energy goes down to there. And then you get ready, your parents are yelling at you because you're late to get to the school bus, and then your energy goes down there. Then you get into a fight with somebody on the bus, energy's down there, your teacher's there, yelling at you. And now you're down to here, and you've lost all this energy in the first 2 hours of your day. And as a kid, how do you replenish your energy stores? And every single kid that we talked to had no idea how they charge the batteries. We talked about introvert, we talked about extrovert, and we just said, okay, so what do you do? And most of them were like, I don't know. I'm like, well, let's talk about that then. It's okay not to know. But let's talk about what it is that it could be. And then the parents at the back of the room, are like, well, listen, do you do house calls? Because I'd like to know, what you do with my kid. How can you show me how I do that to myself? Because I'm exhausted at the end of the day, and I'm a worse parent for it because I've got nothing left in my glass. And it would be nice if someone could pour some, or if I could pour some into my wife's glass, because she's just as tired as I am. Or vice versa. So how do you fill your glass? So like having that knowledge of, everyone seems to think I'm a massive extrovert because I'm kind of a social guy, but I'm a massive introvert. Like I need my writing time. I need my baths. I need my music. I need my walks. I need my alone time. I need to think. I need to work out. I need to play hockey or whatever that is. And if I don't get that, I'm a bear. And when I was speaking all day Saturday, I was absolutely exhausted. It felt like I was hungover on Sunday. And I just wanted to do nothing but be alone. But more importantly, it's like, how do you fill your glass?
Yeah, it's a really good point. and maybe that's the thing too, right? People are afraid that they've kind of filled it a little bit, that they're comfortable, and then now they've got to go back out. And is it going to empty or something? I don't know. I do sense there's a bit of a hesitation, And by the way, 49 is young. I started my It's true. I started my company when I was 45. 44, I guess, really, around then. Something like that. And up until then, it was just a struggle. And God, I would love to be 49 again. That's good. You got nothing but time, my son. Nothing but time.
I think one of the parents, and I wanted to bring this up before we segue as well, but one of the parents we're talking about is them filling their glass up, not with what drives them, but what a coping mechanism leads them to. So it could be internet addiction, it could be porn, it could be gambling, it could be shopping, it could be cute shoes, it could be sports, it could be hockey, could be anything that you're like. Alcohol and drug abuse are the easy ones. But I always, I said this to the parents, on Saturday, but we make fun of people who are addicts. Let me put it this way. If you and I were away for the weekend and I took away your coffee in the morning or your tea or your morning routine, or made your eggs wrong or made your coffee wrong, so Jay out there, how well would you deal with that? And what would you do to get that energy back? Because, that's going to come down where, especially as we get to be 49, we get really regimented with our morning routine of, like I always say, if you want to make someone's day, make them coffee. If you want to make their day shitty, make their coffee wrong. Because, you can just go to a Tim Hortons or a Starbucks and just listen to how everybody wants to have their coffee. And I need to have a half a pump of soya with only half a little like sweetener and milk, not sugar, and milk, not cream. And, they're so precise about how they need to have that. And when we take away that control from them, watch them go crazy. And that's not even an addiction.
It's an addiction to control or something, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But we all have that. And like you want to go back to the judgment side, where you're just sitting there saying you're judging them for their addiction and it's choice. You do the exact same thing, only it doesn't parade or manifest as addiction. It looks at quirky or routine or eccentric. You give it a different name because it's a functional addiction. Or it's a cute one. But it's not, like something that you're judging somebody else for. But if I actually took that away from you, watch your coping mechanisms go through the roof, trying to regain that power back.
Yeah. That thing that you're demanding, really, isn't it? For what purpose? I don't know, because it is odd. The whole coffee thing is odd. When that how particular it's odd, isn't it? I don't know. I find it
I'm a slave to it. I didn't drink coffee before my first marriage, or my only marriage, but it was my first. But she got that stupid Irish cream coffee, which just smelled like absolute heaven. And I never had a cup of coffee until I was about 27, 28.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the old Fred Flintstone Bernie Rubble routine where he would smell something and he would levitate out of bed and his nose would go.
Yeah.
That's what I was in the moment where I smelled that Irish cream coffee. I was like, I was like a hound dog all of a sudden, and I just started floating and gravitating towards this coffee. And I've been an addict ever since. And again, you want to ruin my day? Like, don't give me coffee in the morning. Make me actually think before 9 without any caffeine. And I'm a proponent of mental health. Have a show, Mental Health Monday. But when you mess with my routine, watch me go grr. Because I'm just going to be a good person. And I tell you that.
We all have them, don't we? Right? Whatever that is, those things. Yeah, it's not good. But then again, it's anything sometimes not to think, I think, too, right? Just sometimes routines and habits, I think they help us not think, too, right? Lately, I've been feeling that way. That Paul Simon line, a good day ain't got no rain, a bad day's when she lies in bed and thinks what might have been. That from, I forget what song that's from. But I think that's true for a lot of people. Like a good day is just something sort of really, okay, nothing got in the way. The coffee was fine. Then the bad days when you think about what might have been. And I think that's true for all of us, right? We get these little things that, okay, everything's fine. But then something that sets it off, like that, if you had that argument with your partner, if she made the coffee wrong, then you would find very quickly that what you're upset about is not actually the coffee, because it would probably take 15 minutes into that argument for you to bring up, the way you looked at Jimmy at the 7-Eleven or something. Like there would be something else underneath that. But it takes those catalysts, those tiny little things, to drive us to an argument that actually probably reveals what's really wrong. But as long as everything's like this, we don't have to engage with the reality of what's
I'll see your Jimmy at 7-Eleven and raise you a real story.
Okay.
So I was with my girlfriend, and she asked me about my mother one time, and she loves her mother, and doesn't understand that I don't love my mother, or I don't really have a lot of fondness for my mother, and I haven't spoken to my mother. It will be 6 years coming up next week. And
your mom's been gone 6 years, or
no, she's still alive, but I haven't seen her or talked to her in those 6 years, and which I'm fine with. I'm not resentful or begrudging of it. And she asked me, my girlfriend asked me about why, what was my take on this, and I thought for a second. I was like, I don't mind explaining it to you, but like, do you really want to know before I go down this road? Because it's kind of dark for me. I'm not really happy about the situation. Would ideally like to have it differently, but that's just the way it is, right? And she's like, no, I really want to know. And I just said, okay. So I was telling her about this. I was very engaged. I was very vulnerable. I was very present about, what was coming up for me at the time. And right in the middle of that, she was making lunch and she looked down and then the snare drum started going, and it was all in slow motion in my brain. And I heard her say the words, "This lettuce is really good."
Wow.
Yeah, and here's where Chuck loses his shit.
Okay, that's interesting.
I went straight to the moon, and I said, "Are you effing kidding me? I'm bearing my soul right now." And your response is, "This lettuce is really great." And I'm like, that's it. I gotta go.
Yeah.
Big mental health proponent here, guru of mental health, becomes an 8-year-old foot stomping boy. I got to get out of the house, go for a walk. And I realized, just like you said and brought up, it had nothing to do with the lettuce. It had nothing to do with what she had said.
It had to do with listening, right?
Well, no, it was close. It had everything to do with my trigger is what I had to say doesn't matter or you're not listening to me. And in that moment, my little Chucky doll gets to jump all over that opportunity and say, see, I told you it's real. It's real. They're not listening to you. Nobody gives a shit what you have to say. That's the reason why you have a podcast. So that way you can broadcast your feelings out there. And, all this narrative just keeps going down in like a nanosecond.
Yeah.
And it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to get out there and walk it backwards and realize it had nothing to do. And when I actually got it, that had nothing to do with lettuce.
No.
Or it had nothing to do with my girlfriend saying that. I'm like, there's that dirty little narrative all over again, which is everywhere in my life. It shows up just about everywhere. And this time, the sneaky little thing disguised itself as lettuce, because it's trying to get creative these days because, it's not so easy to trip me up these days. But that really tried hard. And I was like, it almost succeeded. But for the lettuce, by the grace of God, I got it. It wasn't about the lettuce. And I came back. I laughed about it. I'm like, oh, my God. The lettuce. It had nothing to do with that. And then I can come back and I can apologize and say, sorry for being an ass. It had nothing to do with the lettuce. It had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with my dog. But it's taken me 10 years of therapy to get to that point.
Yeah. And you're still reacting. It's interesting, right?
Like knee jerk, not even reacting. It's just like I go from zero to hero of like throwing napalm down, of scaring people. Yeah. And everyone's like, wow, he's so wise and he's got all this wisdom of mental health. Wrong. But you get triggered. It's just like, I don't care who you are unless. Yeah. You can have all the knowledge in the world, and knowledge makes no difference unless you actually have, backup plans in action. And what normally would have ruined a relationship for a day or two or forever, was able, thank God, for me to do the work and come back 10 or 15 minutes later and process that and figure out what it was. And it's too easy to blame somebody else. It could have been too easy to say, she wasn't listening to me. And like that was unpleasant of her. And that was, really reckless, careless. And it had nothing to do with her. It was all my junk, trying to make it on her as if it was her fault. And it had nothing to do with her.
Right. Yeah. Know thyself, right? Okay. Here comes the trigger. Yeah. And then how do you control it though? It is we're all like that. Someone cuts us off in traffic. If we're sitting here talking about someone cutting us off in traffic, we're fine with it, right? Yeah.
You're just picking all my worst triggers right now, Donna.
You're in the moment, and it happens. It's weird. We just have to react. We react to things that we know, and if we're not in the moment, we don't react. We can intellectualize it and say, yeah, next time that happens, I'm not going to do it. And then it happens, and you do it again. And that's sad, isn't it, really? You have to be really enlightened not to do that, I think. Yeah.
I just told them myself now. So, would you want to grace us with one of your little lettuce moments?
Beg your pardon?
I just told them myself no.
Jesus. Yeah. My kids have.
We all have lettuce moment, right? You know what I mean?
Well, my kids have lettuce moments all the time. So I'm trying to think of my way.
My kids, I don't, because my kids do.
No, I'm perfect. But no, they have lettuce moments all the time. Like I'll do something and then it'll be like huge reaction. I'll think, that was not a big thing. Like, what are you reacting to? But that is a whole other trigger, right? Whatever I did is triggering whatever it is that they're doing. And it's like, and because I'm the mother, that right away, the nerves are all, ready to go like this anyway. But yeah, for me, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I do it all the time. And traffic is a big thing for me. Like, when somebody does something that it could cause an accident or something. And then I think I will follow them because I'm of an age. So when I get to, I'll follow them nicely. I won't like be an idiot, but when they do that, and then I get to the stop sign, and it's usually a young fella, right? And I'll roll down my window and he'll look at me with that look, and he'll roll down his window and I'll say, it's like cutting off your mother, isn't it? Like you cut me off in traffic. How satisfying is it to cut off your mother? Like, really? And then they'll go, I'm sorry. I go, that's okay. But really, it couldn't have been that much fun, right? It's when they do it and then you call them on it and then you get them smiling or laughing and then it all becomes like this. So I have learned to do that as opposed to get angry. I try and bring them into a place where they can see that it's really stupid what you just did, but be able to laugh about it a little bit, I think. And then I
have to take your cutting in scenario. And I had to do a lot of deep therapy on that one. Like that was a big one for me because it wasn't. Here's the one thing I'll say about cutting in. Like nobody likes being cut in. Why? Why is that? Is there a phenomenon that is just like you could go around the world, no matter what culture, religion, gender, sex, whatever. Yeah. And what I came up with was this, is because that's entitlement. Because what they're saying is that their time is more valuable than yours, and they don't want to wait in line like you've been waiting in line. So they just think they're going to bypass it all and move in on you because their time is more important to you. And that's the disconnect in the human connection, where every single human being feels like they've been cut off. It has nothing to do with the person cutting them off. It has everything to do with the sense of entitlement that these people have while pulling in. And that's the reason why you have that resistance. And yet nobody realizes that. I think very few people could ever tell you that it's a sense of entitlement that is a disconnect or the resistance or the absolute resentment that they have or abrasion of that person pulling into them. Very few people are like, oh, no, come on. Your time is worth way more than mine. By all means, come on, you and the person behind you. Yes, by all means, you come right in front of us. I've been sitting here for half an hour. I had a coffee in my hand. I'm good. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's when it's dangerous that it bothers me. Like, I don't mind if they cut in. But when they do it and it could have caused an accident, that's when I kind of think, okay, that's just not right. Like you have no right to sort of endanger anyone with your background.
Now you're taking entitlement and then you're throwing on a level of contempt towards
aggression,
people, an antisocial act, which is obviously going to be another layer of disconnect, which is going to go on top of that. So I can deal with a little bit of entitlement, but when it gets down to be an antisocial act, reckless behavior, not worrying about somebody else's safety, because you come first, that's double whammy. Now you get a shotgun. I believe that we should all have paint guns on the nose of our car for people like that, and we should use something like a fluorescent purple or a pink. So that way, when you see the car kind of slide in, and it can't be washed off, and you see them all layered with like all these dots and that, you just think, those guys. Okay, so
that's good.
So now he gets another. You get two barrels of that. So everybody notices that this guy here is a repeat offender.
Yeah,
but that would violate somebody's civil rights or somebody's privacy rights, because the pink and purple, would probably go against the NFL's, charity of the month. Everyone's wearing a pink headband with some sort of cause that they're behind, so we can't do that as well. So.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. The little paint thing. That's fun. That would be fun.
So how do we go back to pivoting in moving forward? Because you're saying in September we're going to have another layer of rollouts right now. I have this thing where how do you traumatize people? You give them freedom and you take it away. Then you give them freedom and you take it away. And so 18 months in, they've given us, multiple rollouts. It's kind of like making gas, really expensive and dropping at a nickel when it's been up a quarter.
Do you think we're going into another lockdown? Do you think that that's going to happen?
Yeah. I don't think that. Especially in Ontario, you're lucky enough to be in Nova Scotia. But in Ontario, I think that we're going to go through another lockdown in September. They're going to come up with some new trumped-up purge of some sort of variant where Doug Ford is going to be able to tell people, like, you can't go out. And here's the crazy thing. Like I said, I was just in North Bay this weekend, which is 5 hours north of Toronto, a small town or city of 65, maybe 70,000 people, maybe all around 100,000 people. They have the same lockdown effect as what we do in Kincardine, and my town's like 10,000 people on Lake Huron. And Toronto has obviously probably 5 million, 7 million in the Golden Horseshoe inside of that. So obviously the people-wise, and then Ontario goes as far as Kenora on the west side, or Dryden, or Sault Ste. Marie, or Wawa, or Thunder Bay, any of those places, Sudbury, which don't have the population that Southern Ontario has. And then they're the exact same protocols as what Toronto is for a population of like a, 0.1% of the size. In fact, you can be in Europe and go through 14 different countries. In Toronto, you can go all the way to Thunder Bay or to Kenora, and you're in the same province for 18 hours, which is, it's a totally different culture, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So I think, when the rollout comes in, they're going to be able to wield some more power. We have our election coming up on the 20th of September.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering too with the election. So the numbers are high in Toronto right now, are they?
They're always high. I mean, like, we have such a population of, and here's the thing: is
the
like,
numbers were down right now. They're not down. The numbers.
I mean, I didn't bother to even look anywhere, Donna, because who knows? Like, where are they coming up with these numbers? Like, I don't know. And I even if they're right, I'm probably past the point of caring anymore, where I just don't care. I'm so apathetic to it. And again, like you said, I don't want to minimize anybody's experience who actually has COVID, who's unfortunately passed away from COVID. But at the same time, like, the toll that it's taking on everybody else around us is like mental health is just overwhelming. Businesses that will just never recover.
Well,
not to say that doesn't.
What's interesting, Chuck, is suicides are down anywhere between 6 to 10% across North America. So that's not interesting. So we all believe this mental health thing with the pandemic, and it certainly has played a toll for sure, had a toll. But isn't it interesting that suicides are down? Now, divorce is up, but that could be good too for people. So, really, right? Let's be honest. So 6 to 10% less people, fewer people are committing suicide. In fact, it's lower than it's been in the last 6 years. So you have to think, okay, what is that? And yet there's more people reaching out, but they think that's a real positive too, because in a time when there's a lot of, people in foxholes or whatever, people are more likely to pray or reach out for help. So they think people had a license to kind of get help, online therapy, whereas they may have felt uncomfortable going to a therapist. So helplines and all those things, they are up. But that could just be a comfort level for people that all of a sudden there was all this talk about it. So there's an acceptance of that. That doesn't mean that mental illness or depression are any higher than they were. Maybe they're lower. So that's best case scenario, that maybe it's not as bad on people as we think it is. Maybe there's a lot of positives.
I seem to have the belief that mental health has always been there, whether it be the 1930s, 1950s, 1970s, even present day. It's just it's either been misdiagnosed or it's been unrecognized or unacknowledged. It's always been there, and there's just been layers of the onion, which gives us the ability to cope through them, whether you become a workaholic. A friend of mine gave me a great example. We were walking down along the lake, and there's these big, huge haves and have-nots of houses. One street of all these massive mansions, glass windows, the sun faces or sets to the west in Kincardine here on Lake Huron, and it goes right down to the water and just disappears like a big ball of sun. It's brilliant. And these rich people get to watch this from the comfort of these big, huge glass windows in their backyard over Lake Huron. And a friend of mine said, wow, that's amazing. That person's done really well, very successful. And I thought to myself, you know what, maybe that person has an addiction to money. Maybe they have a loveless marriage or a trophy wife or whatever. And we as society, we don't look at it that way. We just call that success because he's got a really nice house. We don't know who he had to, screw over or, butt end to get to that level of success, if he has it at all, or what they've had to sacrifice their kids' lives, or guarantee you there's a sacrifice there of some massive sort. But we look at them as saying, yeah, they're successful, opposed to the addiction of maybe being a narcissist and being, you know, nothing else in their life but money and a soulless vampire about that. But we don't look at that. We just call that person successful, because that's how we, you know, we grade people as your net worth or what you have as things to show for effort or worth.
Yeah, and that has nothing to do with happiness. I mean, that's true. I mean, success is whatever happiness means. I don't like the word happy, but, you know, feeling comfortable with yourself and, you know, having a reason, I suppose. I mean, the three things: someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. Yeah. That's success, right? And how many people, I mean, right now I'm struggling with at least one, but most people have a hard time. Most people have a hard time having all three, right? But if you are fortunate enough to have all three, that's a successful life right there. That's happiness in that moment, and that's all you get is moment to moment happiness, right?
I think Oprah said once that if you have three people in your Rolodex or in your life that you can call a true great friend, that's what you're better off. Yeah, 99% of the people.
I think I really do. I think just one, right? If you're really lucky if you've got one good friend. That's true. You just have to kind of.
But here's the thing with that, though. Hang on. So, like, I used to have. I took this course 10 years ago, and we were doing a reach of what your impact was and draw circles of all the communities that you're involved with. My community was the volleyball community, the hockey community, my church, you know, the beach where I lived at the time, you know, minor hockey coaching where I was. So you get all these circles that you have. I said, okay, great. And everyone was just like, had 2 or 3 circles. I had 20. And, you know, I said, oh, I have all these friends, and, you know, I'm very popular. I'm kind of a big deal in my circle, wherever I go, you know, just ego, right? And then that was the start of all those circles just coming into this like that. And then I got a concussion. And then I got a concussion while I had concussion. And I became a complete asshole and just started doing antisocial things to all my relationships because of the concussions, and then watched all the circles, you know, really come in. And the dangerous thing about that is you think that you're losing friends. And I think to myself, you know what? Real true friends, the ones that you would call friends and not acquaintances or strong acquaintances or someone that you have history with, they're the ones that stood beside me the most during that time, even when I was being an asshole. And knowing fully well why I was going through that, and still stood beside me anyway. And I watched my circle go from, let's say, 100 friends to 5. You know, and the traumatizing part of that was, like, I thought that I was such people repellent that I was having all these people fall off, when it wasn't even anything to do with that, although that was a contribution. It was just like, we're so self-indulged as people, and we're so conditional upon our love and how we give it, that if you transcend what our ability is to receive or want or fill our needs, and you don't fill our needs, then we just take our ball and we go home. And then when you watch people do that in your life, you realize, oh, okay, well, that's where Oprah comes back with the rule of 3. If you have 3 of those people, you're an amazingly successsul person in your relationships.
Like I'm a bit of a like, I read obituaries. I'm a bit of a nut, and I remember when there was this thing. I did this experiment. It was a few years back. It's a terrible story in Georgia. This kid shot a baby in the face. Just the mom was walking the baby down the street, and this kid came out of nowhere and shot the baby in the face. The same day in the news, there was this teacher who had given a kidney or some organ to one of her students, and a great risk to her health, as I recall. So I decided I'm going to look at both of their Facebook pages: the kid who shot the baby in the face, and the teacher who gave the organ to the student. And the teacher had, like, really small, like maybe 63 Facebook friends. The kid who shot the baby in the face had 2,000 Facebook friends. And it was just, to me, it was just so interesting. I thought, you know, here's this kind of what we think of muchness, right? Mother Teresa said that's what's wrong with North America. There's too much muchness. And that can relate to the big house on the water with the 7 bathrooms, or it can relate to the 2,000 Facebook friends, or whatever. But it's the substance, right? It's the idea of who are you as a human being, not what have you accumulated, whether that's people or money or whatever. Like, how do you live your life, right? How do you when you put your head in the pillow? What do you think of before you go to sleep that gives you enough peace to fall asleep? And it's not about accumulation of anything, really, right? Because the worst people can have the most things, and the most people.
And mostly do. Mostly do. It's what allows them to sleep at nights. I have the one thing that I say about that is that relationships are really the truly only authentic currency that we as human beings have. There is nothing more of a currency of what your life entails or a legacy that you're going to leave, the relationships you've garnered through the time that you've been on this earth. Not money, not time, because both of those are finite. But I mean, relationships, I mean, they take time, they take trust, they take earning that, that title, because we're guarded human beings, we're jaded, we're leery, we're not vulnerable, we're definitely not trusting with our heart. Say, hey, come on, break my heart again, said nobody ever. So if you have a true friend, that means you've earned that from some point. And again, like that's the only true currency I think we have.
I agree. Yeah. The ability to connect. Yeah, it's important, isn't it? It's important.
Yes. And I want to keep that as our final point as well, because the relationships obviously are the currency of our lives. I truly believe
and lettuce, right? You need good lettuce too, right? You need that.
Well, this is really good lettuce.
As long as you have good lettuce and good friends. Good. Okay.
It's amazing how I can laugh at my stupidity. I just couldn't do that before, but I think one of my greatest gifts now is I can just look at myself. Bill Burr has this great routine where he thinks we need more throat punchings and more punches in the face. And everyone's like, what? We need less of that. He's like, no, I'll tell you one thing. I'm being a bit of a jerk. I'm on our yard with some guy. I'll get a little offside. He's got a dog. I've got a dog. I pipe off. He pounds me in the face. And then I get in the car, my eyes are kind of like watering, and I look at this one, and I look in the mirror, I'm like, it's going to leave a mark tomorrow. I'm like, but you know what? Kind of deserve that. It's going to be a bit of a dick back there. You know, and maybe it's how I won't pipe off so much. I learned a really good lesson about that one, but it took getting punched in the face to actually get that feeling. And I agree 100% because unfortunately, I'm so dumb sometimes. That's the only way that I learn. I need a really good either metaphorical punch in the face, where I gotta sit, I have a little bit of shame afterwards and be like, you know what, being a bit of a dick back there, I kind of deserve that one. Yeah, I could have went totally differently if I wasn't being such an asshole.
I think that too. If we videotaped absolutely everything we did, and then our best and worst moments at the end of the week we had to watch on video, we'd be humiliated. Like we'd be like, for most of the worst, we'd be like, I'm sorry.
I couldn't watch it.
Did I really do that? Yeah, it's terrible.
I gotta watch myself on the news. Like, you know what? And I've honestly said this. I have never once, ever, since I started podcasting about 10 years ago, I've never watched a single one of my shows on repeat. Never.
You haven't, eh?
And I've had some great guests that I could have really just dialed into, but I first of all, I can't stand the sound of my voice. I tend to be a little long on the long-winded side. So when I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my God, will he shut up? Oh my God, there he goes off again. Oh, that tangent. Oh Jesus, make him stop, please. Like, doesn't he have a producer that's gonna mute him? Like, oh my, he said the same thing 3 times. And then I'm like, hey, jerk, that's you. And I'm like, oh, that's right, that's me. Boy, you suck. I just can't stand watching this guy. I'm like, hey, jerk, that's you. Right. Gotta work on that.
I think you do a great job. And it is forgiving ourselves too. Like I wouldn't watch this after either. And because I know I'll feel the same way. I'll think, oh, that was not necessary. Whatever you were talking about there, baby in the face. Like, what are you doing? But like really, but I have to forgive myself too and say, I did my best, enjoyed myself, loved talking to you, and hopefully something I said may, if it doesn't help anybody else, it probably is really good for me to talk through it too. How am I feeling right now at this time, at this moment, in this day, and how is it going to get better tomorrow, right? And I just, forgive myself if I said something stupid. Just move on. I'll say something stupid again, But you're
good news is, Donna, like if you don't forgive yourself, my super fan Robert Wine there will absolutely forgive you for you. because I have this gift of being able to wake up in the morning and get an email from Robert Wine almost
He's
on
lovely,
any
yeah.
comment or post that I have. And he just fills my boots, the way you said earlier on
Yeah,
the
he's
show.
really
I'm just like,
funny.
I've done nothing good in my life to deserve this guy. Like, I don't know if you ever watched that TV show called Flight of the Conchords, the New Zealand
Yeah,
TV guys. Yeah, well, you know, and the manager come in and say, all right, guys, we've built a fan base, so I've got both T-shirts for both of our fans out there now. And like, you know, like, 'cause we have a super fan, and like Robert Wine seems to be my super fan. And there he goes right
You
there.
guys should
It's
have a
almost
lot
an
of
hour talking.
Yeah, Robert's great because he always comments, and they're always great comments. You were on in the background talking to Carrie the other day. My 25-year-old son was in the other room. And then at the end of it, he said, wow, those guys are great. Like, and they're so kind. And I said, you know, I don't know why it hasn't taken off in a huge way. Because to hear guys that are sporty guys and kind of, you know, like guys, and you're talking about your feelings and doing all that, you know, and thoughtfully, and not just to hear yourself talk, but what you have to say is important, and it matters, and you clearly care about other people. I would say keep at this just a little bit longer, but this is going to be big, because listening to you talk, all of you, you're the mainstay, the main guys. It's fantastic. It's really, and it's unusual. You hear a lot of sporty guys talking on the radio. You hear a lot of sensitive guys, but you guys have combined that in a way that is unique, and you have to find a way to market it, because it is really listenable, whether you're me or my 25-year-old kid or whatever. You are. There's something different about it, and I have high hopes that it's going to. I know you're doing well, and you're getting some sponsorships and all that. I think it's going to do even better, though. It's good. It's really good.
Thank you for those kind words. I mean, I really think that, and here's one thing I'm probably relying on this too much is like I just don't care about money. I just don't care. Like, me and Carrie Goulet could be the only two people on the face of this earth that really don't care about wealth. You know, I there was a time where when I owned a recruiting firm, I made $350 a year, and I spent every dime of that, trying to chase happiness. And I don't make anywhere near the amount of money that I made back then, but God, am I happier despite it. It has nothing to do with money, because I truly believe that if you have something in your life, money will just accentuate whatever is in your life. So if you have kindness, and you throw on a ton of money, and you'll have more kindness. And if you have misery in your life, and you just every rock star in the world, and you've got misery and trauma in your life, and you have money to that, watch them die early at 27.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think now I'm ready for it. So I'm going to take your prediction. We've got some really exciting things for the fall with big sponsors and partnerships lining up right now. It's funny that you should mention that. I didn't want to get the cat out of the bag. But I'm going to take that compliment that you said and thank you kindly for it. And thank you for joining us on Mental Health Mondays.
No, it's really good fun. It was good fun. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna McCarthy. And if you can pull up our good friend Carrie Goulet, who doesn't care about money as much as I do.
Listening to you two, it was unbelievable. I love how Robert comes on and he said the exact same thing. It's an hour? Yeah. Like, it's amazing how when you just listen to people talk and they talk their true feelings, it just goes and you don't even notice it. So very well done.
Sometimes I think when I'm walking down the road and I've got this, like, it's just an uncomfortable feeling, and I'm looking around and like it feels like something's up my ass, and I look down and it's Robert Wine's head, and he's kicking his legs to get in deeper, and it's like, oh my God, like Robert Wine, get your head out of my ass,
He's a special.
Love that guy.
I did want to say something though as you guys were talking, and I think Donna, you'll remind us as we wrap up. North Bay was where Karen was up in one of the.
I was thinking that when he said it. Yeah.
When you were talking about North Bay, Chuck, a lot of people didn't know this. I didn't know this until my sister's wake, or I guess celebration of life at the Bottom Line.
Bottom Line, yeah, I remember that.
All the way there. Actually took me aside.
I remember that. Yeah.
And she said, your sister and I actually slept under a bridge for a while when they let us out. Neither one of us had any money. And that was the first time I knew my sister, as you know, Donna. I knew she had some times where she was on the street and all that stuff, but I never realized until that moment. You know, they were sleeping under a bridge in cardboard boxes. My beautiful sister. And then when I look back and I went up to see her a couple times in North Bay, it was I gotta admit, it was a city or a town that looked very homeless. And I mean that in all the best ways you could say it. There were people at every corner that were sitting there with, you know, hats or signs, and much more than I saw when I was in Toronto. So it's and that was 3 years ago. So I just hope it gets better.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Well,
tough town.
we're gonna have the CMH from North Bay on the show, talking about the event we had on Saturday. So in a couple weeks, we're gonna have them on the show and really get into what you just talked about, Goosh.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. Donna, you're always beautiful. Love you dearly. Look
Yes,
forward
thank
to
you, Donna.
chatting with you over the week. And of course, Chuck, always a pleasure hosting your show or producing your show. I was trying to find some pictures of things. It was really difficult because what you guys were talking about, really, there were no pictures to define what you were talking about. And I did want to comment on one part too, Donna, when you talked about the young boy shooting. It's amazing how negativity draws a family of people. It's just incredible. Watch our news today. Everything is negative, negative, negative. And when we do have a brightness of hope, it's a flash and it's gone. So it's just a very good point that we have to start looking at the good things in life as we move forward. I'll tell you, because when you get to be my age now, every moment is precious. So
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm right there with you on the age thing too. Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Chuck. Wrap it up, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Donna. So thanks for joining us again on Mental Health Monday. It's the end of August, and you blinked, and summer is come and gone. And now we're coming into September, and obviously it's back to school. We have a different generation right now of kids that have survived the last 18 months of COVID. They are now going back to school. Parents are starting to start realizing how amazing our school teachers are and what superheroes they really are. And my last moment, what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, do me a favor, thank a teacher. You know, this has been a horrible time in the last 18 months where we've been able to really understand how great teachers are. They're not just babysitters, they're educators. If you can think about one person in your entire life that saw the greatness inside of you before you saw it yourself, it was probably most likely a teacher or a coach. So they get underpaid and overworked in everything that they do. I'd like to live in a world where instead of having rock stars and celebrities who play sports get off the bus making $7.5 million a year, getting autographs, being teachers coming off that bus, you know, and people coming up to them, you know, and saying, thank you for inspiring me for what I've done in my life right now. You haven't made a single nickel of what I've done, but everything I've made is because of you. And I've got 5 or 6 teachers in my life to do that. So now that we're going back to school, please be safe next week after Labor Day. We will be off next week on Labor Day. But we'll look forward to seeing you on Mental Health Monday in 2 weeks in the middle of September. And thanks a lot for joining us on the show tonight. Have a good night.